young lady. Thank you, guys. Some of you may remember that. Giving, growing, and transforming. And that was the theme that we had when we rebuilt this building. And our prayers were answered in many wonderful ways as we did this. This morning I want to talk about this concept of transformational prayer. And what I'd like to do is just remind you, those who know and those who don't, share with you, that Unity teaches us a 5-step process to prayer. First of all, you relax. And some people say, yeah, but I was just in a car accident and I want to pray. How do I relax? But you do relax, okay? You relax your thinking, you relax your body. Then the second part of it is to take a moment and to contemplate. It's contemplation. In other words, you may be asking for something. Most prayer is situational in nature. There's a situation that I want to resolve. There is a challenge that I'm having in my life. There's a person that I'm having in my life. And so we step into that second part, which is this idea of contemplation. So I can contemplate something. I can use, if you would, an affirmation in that time to prepare myself for the next step, which is meditation, being in a silence for a while. And then after meditation, or during meditation, or maybe a few weeks later, you come to the point of realization. What do I realize? What happens in this process of prayer? And then we give thanks. Now you give thanks right after you finish your prayer. You don't wait for the realization, okay, and then say thank you. You give thanks for the fact that it's going to happen at some point in the right way, in the right manner. That's what we're taught in Unity, and that's the 5-step prayer process that Unity teaches. And there's nothing wrong. I mean, it's wonderful, but the only thing is you have to stop and think about it. And so sometimes we don't see it as transformational prayer. We see it as a prayer process. And we think about this and say, I got to sit down and do this. And I don't have time to sit down and do this. So what is a way in which we can pray so that we experience, if you would, transformation in a given moment? And I think that's what I'm talking about and hoping to be talking about today, is this transformational opportunity to pray in a given moment about a situation or about a feeling or a belief so that I can have relief and my life is transformed. There was a young girl who, about 9 years old, she went to school one day and it was forecast that there was going to be rain and some thunderstorms in the afternoon. And so she took her raincoat with her and a little hat. She was all prepared for it. And when she came out of school, sure enough, it was raining and it was thundering and lightning, but it was really much more than anybody expected. It was pretty severe. And so her mother was at home and kind of noticed and started to worry about whether or not Sally, without being traumatized, would make it home, okay? So she was concerned about her, so she got in her car and she took the path back towards the school that Sally would use coming home. And sure enough, she saw Sally. And the lightning was pretty frequent. And the lightning would happen, and little Sally would just smile. And then her mother looked at her for a second and thought that was kind of strange. And so the lightning would happen, and Sally would smile again. And after 2 or 3 times of this, her mother finally said, Sally, come on, get in the car. And she said, Sally, I don't understand. When the lightning took place, you were smiling. She said, oh, yes, God was taking my picture. Right? But there's something in that story that says how we feel determines our emotions, which determines our action. She wasn't afraid of the lightning. She wasn't afraid of the thunder. She thought God was taking her picture. And so she stepped into this idea. And so the first thing as we look at this concept of transformational prayer is that we understand that there are 2 feelings. The first feeling is fear, and most of us are raised with that. Most of us have some of that. Some have more than others. And then there is the feeling of love. And so we have fear on one side and love on the other side. And when we step into either one of those, they create certain kinds of emotion. We all know that fear creates the emotion of shame. It creates the emotion of anger. It creates the emotion of judgment. It creates the emotion of blame. And we can become pretty good at that if we want to. But on the other hand, when we have this feeling of love, it creates a whole different set of emotions. It creates an emotion where we feel good about ourselves, where we feel worthy. It sets up an emotion that says, I care about you and I look through your stuff so I can step into being a help to you and being a part of who you are and support you. That's ministry. That's what we are doing here together. And it also, love is that opportunity to understand that we are really spiritual beings. It's of a spiritual nature because God is love. And when I find myself, in essence, starting to believe what I am seeing, what I'm experiencing, that's fear-based. When I see what's happening around me and look through that and understand that somebody else is maybe living in fear, but not judging them, understanding that maybe there's a misunderstanding that's taking place, maybe seeing that what looks real isn't really real, so that I can look through everybody's stuff, including my own, and see the love that's there, feel the love that's there, be the love that is there. And so what happens is, again, we stop, when we use that feeling of fear, we justify our behavior. When we have that feeling of love, there's nothing to justify. We just are, and we're in it, and we experience it, and we love it. So the question comes, what do I do when I find myself in that state of fear? And how do I recognize it? Well, let me say, if you are reacting, you're probably living in fear, even in the moment. You may not believe in doing that. You may have a whole belief system that's right on target, that you are a spiritual being. Is that thundering? I want to smile. Anyway, so what happens, you see, is that as we step in out of fear, we become aware of our spiritual nature. And we do that by responding, not reacting. So what is a practical application of transformational prayer? It's taking a moment. You don't have to go through the whole 5-step process. And yet you do quickly if you're in the habit of it. You relax for a moment. You let go of what's happening around you. And when you let go of what's happening around you, you then say, I don't want to act this way. This is not who I am. And so, Spirit, just take a second and let me come from my heart and let me feel and understand the love that is moving in and through me as the energy of God. I want to be an expression of love, not fear. That's transformational prayer. And you know, when you do that on a regular basis, it becomes a habit. And you are praying without ceasing and not even realizing it. Now, one of the things that happens is that as we start to understand who we are, we have to look at our beliefs. And all of us have core beliefs. We have beliefs that come from our hearts. And they aren't all healthy. They aren't all in the best interest for us. We have beliefs that we've incorporated into our thought process, into our understanding, into our perceptions that hold us back and limit us. And we have beliefs that can create an opportunity for unlimited possibilities in our lives. We choose that. We have the opportunity to do that. And when we intellectually say that makes sense, I'm a child of God, therefore I'm unlimited. Boy, that makes sense. I like that. And so I say that. But in my heart, I have a core value that says I am not perfect. I am not, in the eyes of God, forgiven. I am not, in the eyes of God, worthy. Now, we don't teach that. And that is a falsification of a belief system. And when we step into that, though, you see, we do not allow ourselves to be unlimited. We allow ourselves to be limited. And when that happens, the intellectual truth comes into the core belief system that is not my highest belief system. Then what happens is that I come apart at the seams. And we call that chemicalization. Everybody here knows what Alka-Seltzer is, probably. I hope you don't have to use it, but if you do, okay. And Alka-Seltzer is, as you know, when you drop it in a little glass of water, I started to say can of water, I know that doesn't exist, glass of water, that what happens is it starts to fizz. Well, you see, when a truth comes to you, is presented to you, that is making sense to you intuitively, making sense to you that you want to change and that's how you want to be, that's what you want to believe, that is the intellectual understanding of it. But when you start to say that's what I believe and you don't believe it, there's a different core value there, then there is conflict and that causes chemicalization. Chemicalization is just reacting to a new idea before I'm ready. And it's okay, it's good, it's actually healthy in a way, as long as it doesn't go too long. And so I respond to that reaction through the power of transformational prayer. Again, I understand that I have a belief system. And so I use denials and affirmations in controlling and choosing how I want to show up. Denial means it doesn't mean it didn't happen. It means that I embrace the fact that I believe this way, that I think less of myself than I should, that I don't really believe that God loves me totally unconditionally. And I'm still working on it. And so I understand that, and when I understand that, I then say, the truth is that God loves me unconditionally. That's a tough one some people get over when they come into unity, to move through. And that creates that chemicalization, that imbalance at first. And then over time, I start to believe it because I deny that the understanding that God does not love me, sees me as unworthy, I deny that that has any power over me. That's what a denial is. Denying that anything that's not the truth has any power over me. And I'm able to step into the affirmation, I am a beautiful child of God. I am worthy of all the good that God is. I am an heir of all that God is. And so when I find myself in that situation of conflict, that's when I might do a little longer prayer. And I might have to do it a number of times in order to really take it in and see my belief system change. And when my belief system changes, then my life is transformed. And so I take a few moments to say, hey, this is what I think. I don't know why I'm reacting this. Why am I reacting this? And that's kind of like a prayer. Why? And when I figure it out and start to think about it, it will come to me. And as it comes to me, I examine it and I allow it to have no power over me. And then I might sit down and write the appropriate affirmation. Or in the moment, I may say, I don't want to believe this way. I must a little bit because I'm resisting this. And so I affirm the truth of who and what I am, or of this situation, or these circumstances. You see, that's having the choice over what we believe. And most of us are raised in error consciousness. We are in a consciousness on the earth that many people believe the perceptions of negativity, the perceptions of duality. And what we are striving to do is to let go of the negativity because it's not truth, and to let go of those ideas, those perceptions that are in my highest good, and step into the power that transformational prayer gives me. And so I change my belief systems with that power. Now, when I change my belief systems, there starts to be a feeling, an emotion, a perception of relief. Because what's happening, you see, is I'm taking the darkness that's in my life and replacing it with light. I'm taking the pain that's in my life and replacing it with love. I'm taking the lack of opportunity that I think is in my life, and I'm replacing it with all the opportunity that stands before me. And that starts to bring about a sense of relief. Now, if you look at this idea of relief, what it really says is that I have been in the darkness for a while over a given situation. Doesn't mean you're totally in the darkness. It just means in a given situation. And so I really want to change that. And so what I start to do is I bring that up into the shadow. And when I start to bring it into the shadow, I have two choices. I can either stuff it, now that's psychological denial, or I can embrace it. And when I embrace the shadow, I start to allow light to shed and to give me the truth of who and what I am. When I say I don't want to deal with that, then I move back into the darkness, back into fear, back into pain. We have the choice to feel that relief, to accept that relief, to step into that belief. And you see, when we break through the shadow, we bring in the light of truth and we free ourselves, if you would, from any false pretense of who we are. It took me quite a while in Unity. I was even a spiritual director before I truly, truly understood without any doubt whatsoever that Jesus didn't die for my sins. Because you see, I'd been brought up that way. I'd thought that way. I didn't know any other way. And yet I knew intellectually, I knew in my heart that that was not the truth because I felt God. And every time my prayer was, do I feel God in this moment? In this belief system? And the answer was always yes. Was always evident to me. But I had to go through that process from time to time so that I could get to the point that I totally accepted that as my belief system, and that gave me total relief. And understand that, and obviously more confidence in what I was doing. And so we look at this idea of relief. You see, when we are in the human condition, we are in victimization. When we are in the spiritual condition, we are in love. And we know the difference that makes. So whenever I start to feel relief through the power of transformational prayer, I give thanks. And when I give thanks, I feel the abundance and I feel the joy. You know, Jesus, in talking to disciples in the 15th chapter of John, talked about the idea with them that what I want you to do is ask so you will receive. And the reason I want you to receive is so that you can experience the joy I experience in my oneness with the Father. And then he made an interesting statement. He says, I cannot pray for you to make the difference. Now, this is a little bit of a translation, okay, a metaphysical translation. But it reads pretty much this way. I can't do that. But God loves you totally, so you can do it for yourselves. You are connected with what he called the Father. That's what he was really saying. So it's up to you. And this will bring joy in your life and give you relief. And as we do this over and over again on a regular basis, it becomes a habit to us to examine how we feel, to examine our emotions in the moment. When we step into the idea of belief, we know that sometimes it's a problem and yet it is a solution. That true belief is really the solution. As we do that, as we start to feel the relief, then we start to experience transformation. What is transformation? Well, it's changing your mind. Moving to a higher level. It is awakening. to the truth that you are divine mind, that you are that expression of God, that you are that perfect idea in the world. It is becoming enlightened. Now, I know some people go, oh, but I'm not a guru. I'm not a monk. I don't know if I can be enlightened or not. And the truth is we all are enlightened. And how are we enlightened is when we start to recognize that a feeling or an emotion is not in alignment with the spiritual being that I am. When we start to understand that we need to change our belief system sometimes in order to become unlimited in nature. When we start to understand and feel the relief of God's love flowing in and through us. That's when we start to transform. That's when we have the renewing of the mind that Paul talked about. That's when we can behold the Christ within as our hope of glory. That's when we start to understand the power of love and experience it. A while back, there was a submarine captain, and when he came into port, there'd been a pretty vicious storm for several days, hurricane-sized winds. And he came into port a few days after that, and they said, well, how did you do with the storm? And he said, what storm? And they said, well, you know, the big hurricane. He goes, well, I didn't even know about that. And they said, well, you didn't experience it all? He said, no. We were submerged for a couple months. And when we are submerged, we get into what they call a sea of tranquility. Submariners call it that. That's a place, a cushion, if you would, in the sea where you don't feel anything that's going on above or below. You just are in the moment. He said, that's where we were. Well, you know, you and I are like the ocean. We can be in that sea, that consciousness of love. We can be so submerged in it that the storms of life are there, we deal with them, but they don't control us. The storms of life are there, but we understand it's part of the human experience, not the spiritual experience. That all of that is temporary, and it can pass by, and we can feel at ease. We can feel the love. We are in the consciousness and the presence of divine mind, divine idea, and divine expression. This week, be in that consciousness of the divine and see if the storms of life aren't just a little bit easier to deal with. Thank you.